Alright, so in this video it will be a very quick recap and summary on the thing that we have learned in chapter 1. Okay, so this is for your first chapter, which is called as representation of data. So I hope that you still remember that for this chapter you are learning actually quite a lot of things. So the first thing that we learn is something called measure of central tendency. Then after that, variation and coding. And after that, we learn also a lot of like different graphic representation of data. Okay, so let's try to do some recap on the thing that we have learned. Okay, so if you still remember, then the first one that we talk about is the measure of central tendency. Okay, so under the measure of central tendency, you actually have three important things, which is the first one is called as the mode. So the mode is the one that with the highest frequency. Okay, then after that, you know what is that mean by median. Okay, which is basically the value in like the mid value, okay, the midpoint value. I don't say like midpoint, like the middle value lah. Okay, then after that I'll show you more about the median. I want to do some clarification about the method that we have used previously. So I have actually tried out like the different methods, so let's try not to follow the book to use that one, because I realized that some bugs happen for that method. So just forget about that, then try to adapt to the new method. I hope that it will be like much more easier for you. Okay, then the last one you learn about mean, which we talk about the average value. Okay, so under everything here, then for the mean, then you have the formula of how to find mean. Is basically you add all the sum together, then divide by the number of frequency, the number of data that you have. So if the data is in like group data, then you will put in like sum of your frequency times with your data, then divide by the sum of your f. Okay, so these two formula will be given in your exam as well. Okay, so the next one, then you learn about variation. Okay, so central tendency, normally we talk about average. Okay, so for variation, we talk about how far or how varied the data from the mean itself. Okay, so under this one, you have range, which is you use the maximum value to minus the minimum value. Then after that, you have the second one, which is called interquartile range, which you use the third quartile to minus your first quartile. So this one I'll be explaining again together with the median just now. Then the last one, you learn about standard deviation. Okay, which is basically the square root of variance. Okay, so for this one, you also have your formula in your formula sheet. So it will be standard deviation equals to some square root of the sum for every data minus the mean squared divided by n, or if you are apply in a scenario that you need to find out the standard deviation, then you use the second one, will be much more easier for you. So you normally we use the first one if like for example they want you to find this term or so on, then you will try to use this. Okay, so for group data, then you will be having a f lah. So everything is the same, but then you will multiply everything with a frequency. Alright, so same thing, this one will be given in your formula as well. Okay, so now I want to do some very quick revision or like the introduction of the new method to you for the median and the first quartile and the third quartile. Okay, how do you do that? So previously you forget the one that you need to take the next value or the so on. So I hope that this method will be quite easy for you, and I try already for different number, it should work. it should work better. Okay, so I'm going to try out 4 set of value here, because when you divide by 2 then it's exactly give you the same thing, so I don't really need to try all. Okay, let's say I have a set of value that is 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Okay, so obviously from this data I think it's very obvious that you can get the median is basically 6. And what is your Q1? So this number, divide the data into first half and the second half. So for the first half, the half of the first half is basically your Q1, then the half of your second half is your Q3, which is your third quartile. Okay, so let's say if you have a very long number, like you have quite a lot of number, like it's very hard for you to identify like this, then how can you do that? Okay, so instead of doing the previous method, right, please do like this. So you see, now every time start with median first. Okay, so how many data do you have? You have 5 value here. So it's like from the first data to the 5th data. So I do 1 plus 5. Is that okay? The 1 here is like from first data to the 5th data. I want to find the middle point. So 1 plus 5 give me 2. Then it gives me 3, which is the third. So third value is my median, which is 1, 2, 3, give me 6. Okay? So after you find out the median already, then now what you do? Okay, so for this one, you take the third one. So you know that at the third value is going to divide your data into like 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and then 3 is the middle, right? Then you have 4, 5. So to find the first half, then what you do? You have first value and second value. So 1 plus 2, divide by 2. Okay, which will give you like 3 divided by 2, which give you 1.5. Okay, so what does that mean by 1.5? Meaning that the value between the first value and the second value. So that's why your Q1 will be 2 plus 4 divided by 2, which is exactly the same thing like what we have identified just now. Okay, so now try to do a new one. Okay, now let's go to third quartile. So you have 8 and 10, which is my 4th value and my 5th value, right? So 4 plus 5, I'll be able to divide by 2 as well. Then I'll get 4.5. So 4.5 meaning the 4th and the 5th value, the midpoint. So Q3 will be equals to 8 plus 10 divided by 2, which is 9. Okay? I hope that this method is easier for you. Okay, let's try the other one. Let's say if I have a value of like 8 numbers. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Okay, I have 8 value here. Okay, so let's try to use the method again. Okay, so now start with the median first. You have 8 values, so from the first to the 8, so that's why 1 plus 8. Divide by 2, then you get 9 divided by 2, which is 4.5. So my median will be at the value between the 4th value and the 5th value. So which the median will actually give me 1, 2, 3, 4. So 8 plus 10 divided by 2, which I will get a 9. Okay? So I know that my median cut my value in the place of 4.5. So that's why I know that for Q1, it will be for the first number until the 4th number. Okay? For Q3, it's going to be the 5th number up to the 8th number. So divide by 2. Same thing for both. So you get 2.5. And here you get 13 divided by 2, which is 6.5. Okay? So for your Q1, it's going to be the midpoint of the second value and the third value. So which is 4 plus 6 divided by 2, which gives you 5. So for Q3, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 12 plus 14 divided by 2, which gives you 13. Okay, now let's try to check whether it's correct or not. So I have 8 value here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So middle is here. So correct, the midpoint, which is 9, is my median. So now, cut it as half. So I put inside here. So I have 4, 6, 8. 4, 2, 4, 6, 8 here. So which my midpoint is between 2 and 6, which is correct, which is 5. So the same thing, the midpoint cut here. So here, my midpoint is going to be here. So this is how I get 13. Okay, so you do the same thing for everything, that sometimes you will get a full value, a whole number, then you just take the exact whole number. So if you get something that is 0.5, meaning that you need to divide by both the number that is beside it. So meaning like 2.5, then it will be the middle of the second and the third. Like it makes sense, right? Like 2.5, which means between 2 and 3. So 6.5 means between 6 and 7. So this is how you identify it. Okay, so I hope that this one can help you to get the idea. Okay, alright, so let's continue. Then after that, the third part, you learn about coding. Okay, so for your coding, right, in the previous lecture I mentioned that actually the multiply is like the extra knowledge for you since you already learned this. So I just want to recap this, that please make sure that when you go through your syllabus, right, they actually talk about minus and plus only. So meaning like if you have some new set of value that is y equals to x minus a, every of your set of data is going to be minus a, then your mean will be minus a as well. Okay, so means that if I want to find the new y, then what I will be doing, then I will be finding the old x, then I minus the a, meaning if all of my data is like minus by 5, then my mean will be minus by 5 as well. Okay, then after that you have standard deviation. So remember, any plus and minus is not going to affect your standard deviation. So standard deviation of y is basically the same thing like the standard deviation of your x. Okay, so if you want to identify it, right, then how are you going to write that? Then you can write it in a way that like this is sum of x, right? So this is the y. Okay, so meaning you will be writing like mean for y, okay, will be equals to sum of x divide by your start with the y first. So since y is x minus a, right, which means it's going to be sum of x minus a, every data of your y divide by the number of n that you have, then will be equals to sum of x divide by n minus a. So which these two you should able to get the exact same answer. Okay, then after that, when you have standard deviation, then what do you have? So since the standard deviation is the same, meaning that for y, it's going to be like sum of every data minus a square divided by n. Okay, I'm using this formula. Alright, so my x now become x minus a already because I want sum of y. So what is the y square? Is x minus a square. Okay, then minus my mean divide by n as well, then the whole thing square. Okay, this thing will be exactly equals to the square root of x square over n minus the sum of x divided by n square. Okay, if you don't understand this part, it's alright. So you just use the same idea that we have done previously. So you just find out what is the standard deviation for x for your y first, then only you substitute. Like in case of sometimes they want you to find sum of square, something like that. Okay, so or you can try to understand this. Okay, so for this chapter, right, please bear in mind that for your coding, the formula will not be given in your exam. So make sure that you can understand everything, then go through it again. Alright, so the next one I'll be talking about the graphic representation. Okay, so you learn 4 types of graphic here, which like the first one, okay, which like the first one we talk about the stem and plot. So for stem and plot, normally we stem and leaf. Okay, so for stem and leaf diagram, normally we use for the data which you have like quite a small quantity of data, because you need to state every data, so it's very hard for you to like really do an analysis from the stem and leaf. Okay, so how's the stem and leaf look like? You have a single one, which is like you have a stem in front. Okay, I'll write like this. So you have stem, then you have your leaves. Okay, and remember, for stem and leaf you need to write down your key. Okay, then you will write down something like this lah. Okay, then after that, the second one, you have a back-to-back one. So for back-to-back one, normally you are trying to compare two category of data, which you have something like this. Okay, so the same thing, you will be writing in middle, then after that you try to write it lah. Okay, so it will be something like this. So the same thing, you need to write down your key as well. Then after that, for the third type, for the second graphic representation, you have box and whisker. Okay, so for box and whisker, it does not tell you the exact value of your data. It only tells you some special measure about your data. So your box and whisker will look something like this. Okay, I just simply draw it. Okay, so the front and the end means the minimum value and the maximum value. Okay, so for the box, the limit here, this is your Q1, this is your Q3, and the middle line is your median. Okay, so for this box and whisker, it tells you about your outlier also. So anything that is lesser than 1.5 IQR from your Q1, or like greater than 1.5 IQR from your Q3, is the data that considered as outlier. Okay, then the next one we learn about histogram. So what is important for histogram? You must know what is the difference between limit and boundary. So sometimes you have data like this, like 1.1 to 5, 6 to 10, and then 11 to 15. Okay, so all this value is called limit. But for histogram, you need boundary. So how do you find boundary? It's like in the between here. So for here is 5.5. So here is like 10.5. So this is how you get 15.5 and 0.5. Okay, so sometimes the data will straight away give you something that is in boundary already, meaning that maybe they write it in the way that like 0 to 5, and then 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15. So for this case, right, you see the number is the same, meaning they are already the boundary already. So this one, you do not actually need to find the boundary anymore. Okay, so under histogram, you have two types also, which is the first one is when your width for your limit is actually the same. So equal class width. Okay, so what you try to do is you just do the normal one, which is like here will be your boundaries. Okay, which will be something like this, and just roughly draw it. Then after that, you have here is basically your frequency. Okay, then after that, for the second one, you have a different class width, not equal width. So what do you need to do is still remember, you need to find out your frequency density, which this one you use boundary and this one you use frequency density. So how do you find frequency density? You need to use, I write FD. Okay, you need to use your frequency to divide the width. Then only you can start to plot your histogram. Okay, then the last one you learn about cumulative frequency graph. Cumulative frequency graph. So how do you find cumulative frequency? It's like by adding all the graph together, by adding all the frequency one by one. Okay, so when you do cumulative frequency graph, right, you must make sure that you are using upper boundaries. So you have two types as well. The first one is the polygon one. So meaning that you have like it's the same cumulative frequency and upper boundary. So for this type of graph, it only tells you the value that is less than a certain value, which is your upper boundary here. So for polygon, it will be look something like a straight. I mean, this is not a good one, but it's basically you need to use a straight line and connect them together. Okay. So for second one, you have a cumulative frequency curve, which you will try to do it in like a curve. Okay, it will be something like this lah. So same thing, cumulative frequency, and you have your upper boundary here. So for this one, make sure that you know how to find the percentage of the certain. So meaning that if I give you that what is the percentage for the data that is like lesser than 10.5, then you need to know how to read from the curve. Then how about more than, then you must remember you can only read less than, so you must use your total to minus the less than part. Okay, so make sure that you know how to read the percentage. Then after that, make sure that you know how to read the median, the Q1 and the Q3 from the graph above. Okay, so I'm not going to like go in like very detail for every part. It's just basically like telling you what should you know. So if you have forget something, then make sure that you try to do revision in the previous video. Okay, so I hope that this one can give you a rough like idea on like what you need to study for chapter 1. Okay, that's it. Thank you.